Welcome into this week's edition of the Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things college basketball, WNBA, and oh so much more. I say both of those entities, Mitch Northam, because something tells me we will be hitting the association in addition to recapping the week that was and looking ahead at the week to come in the world of women's college basketball. I'm excited to hear that while on a bachelor party this weekend, you actually were spreading the good word of women's basketball. Do tell, sir. Have we created some more women's college basketball fans down either in the Triangle, or is this the homies from Maryland?
Yeah, these are a bunch of boys from Charlotte, and once that Broncos Bills game kind of got out of hand, we switched over to South Carolina, Texas, and saw Dawn Staley's team, putting in some work against Vic Schaefer, which is something she's accustomed to from Vic's days in the old SEC, and now with Texas in the new SEC. Vic getting that work with the Longhorns. Longhorns will be fine. But yeah, so we watched that for a little bit, which was a lot of fun.
We'll get into that game and a whole lot more. But first, let's start this week, not with her of the week, but with a very important public service announcement, Mitch. I sent this to you earlier in the week. I'm now wondering if maybe I should have surprised you and started the show with it. I want to thank CaitlinClark, not just because thankfully her stalker situation has been rectified. Very scary stuff in Indianapolis. But I want to thank CaitlinClark, and I would like to thank at Mr. Bill 11 on X for revealing to us that if CaitlinClark hadn't absolutely torched Hailey Van Lith in March, and Hailey Van Lith hadn't transferred from LSU to TCU, which would cut into Haley Cavender's playing time, which meant that the Cavender twins had to transfer back to Miami, Carson Beck would not be in line to be the starting quarterback at TheU in his 6th season of eligibility. We have to start the program with that viral tweet because I think it about sums up where we are in the world of college athletics in 2025.
So if you're a Miami fan, you should be thanking CaitlinClark, essentially, because not only did you get not one, but both Cavender twins back, but now you have a replacement lined up for Mr. Cam Ward. And now, you certainly are going to be paying a lot of money in NIL for Carson Beck. But yeah, the dominoes started in the Elite Eight in Albany when Hailey Van Lith simply could not keep up with CaitlinClark and just shrugged to the idea of trying to defend her, which led her to TCU, which has led her to like a revival, which has been awesome. I mean, she's playing better than she ever has before. And then, of course, Haley Cavender was there. And then Hannah decided to come back, and Haley decided to, well, I don't want to play second fiddle to Hailey Van Lith, so let me go back to Miami and ball out with Jasmine Roberts and everybody. And so it's worked out for everybody, I think. So, yeah, good job, Caitlin.
We'll see if it works out for Carson. But hey, I don't think the Cavender twins have any more eligibility, but they're probably just going to start the modeling influencer career post-grad in Coral Gables, or rather pick it up because that's what they did last year. The point is, thank you, CaitlinClark, although I think Hailey Van Lith would have transferred even if she hadn't been burnt toast on national television in the Albany Regional. All right, let's get to our her of the week, Mitch. I actually had someone else written down. I actually had a whole team written down for her of the week, but then you informed me of a her of the week that is no doubt has to be the winner this week. And that's Grace Larkins of South Dakota, who has averaged 39.5 points, 12.5 boards, 7 assists in the Coyotes' 2 wins this week. They're 9-9 overall. The Summit League still runs through their rivals, the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, who, what is the streak now at, Mitch? They haven't lost a conference game, and it's like 2019 or something like that. It's something crazy that the Jackrabbits last lost a conference game. But at 9-9, South Dakota sitting in 3rd place in the Summit League standings, and a credit to Grace Larkins, 39.5 points between the last 2 games on average. Walking bucket. Did you know about Grace Larkins before this season?
I was aware of Grace Larkins' game somewhat. I didn't know that she had gone off in this particular way actually until Sunday evening, like right around the time that we were texting. On Sundays, I text a lot with Mel Greenberg. Folks know him on Twitter as the WAM Hoops Guru. That was been around women's college basketball a long time, started the AP poll, all that. I help him with the USBWA weekly, player awards and stuff. So we pick, 5 players for kind of a starting 5, and then a freshman of the week and a team of the week. and we're kind of going through the players and stuff. And, you know, I do my thing where I dig through some box scores and try to find out, you know, who had the best performances. And then, yeah, all of a sudden, I think it was a tweet from her Hoop Stats, which showed me that, yeah, Grace Larkins had 45 points in one of those games, I think. And then so I went back and looked at her box score and was like, oh, and actually she had like a high 30 game too. And yeah, so she's been balling out. And South Dakota, you know, might have a chance to make things interesting in the Summit this year, which is usually a pretty good mid-major league. You know, there with the Dakotas and some other teams involved. And, you know, I got to see the Jackrabbits play in person a couple years ago when they went to Virginia Tech in the first round and upset a pre-Juju Watkins era USC team in Blacksburg. So, yeah, Summit League, beware of Grace Larkins.
Grace Larkins is also an Altoona, Iowa native, played at Southeast Polk. So I apologize, Grace. I wasn't familiar with your game, but I'm very familiar with your hometown. There's a great Bass Pro Shops in Altoona. There's also a great Culver's that I used to frequent, Mitch, on my drives from Iowa City to Des Moines, Iowa on I-80. Shout out to the world's largest truck stop on I-80, just because. Let's keep it moving with this week's starting five. Again, these are our 5 biggest games of the week. That was our 5 biggest characters. Mitch has got 3 of this week's starting 5. I've got 2. Kick us off, Mitch, with a game that you were at and a game that so many on Twitter remarked, I cannot believe this is the same sport as some of the other games going on around the country at the very same time.
Yeah. So last Thursday I was at North Carolina versus Duke. Great atmosphere. You know, kids were back on campus in Chapel Hill. It was, you know, really, really awesome college basketball atmosphere. What was not awesome was the play on the court. This game was 16-16 at the half. It was really, really ugly. You know, both coaches, Kara Lawson and Courtney Bankart, after the game, just kind of lamented, you know, both teams' offensive performances. Courtney Bankart was like serious about, you know, she wasn't sure if she was going to show her team this film after the game. You know, it was really ugly, a really grinded out game that went to overtime. It's cliche to describe it as a rock fight, but it very much was. You know, Duke shot 23% from the floor, 23% from three-point land, and also missed 8 free throws in a 7-point loss, which is not what you want. And Carolina really not much better, 32% from the floor, 25% from three, and they missed 8 free throws. So, again, not what you want, but Carolina guts it out. They won the rebounding battle. They had Alyssa Utsby step up. They had Lexi Donarski make some plays, Indy Navarre make some plays. So they got some buckets when they needed them. This is we are going to see a repeat of this. This is you know, one of the ACC's protected rivals this season. So Duke and Carolina, I believe, will finish the season with each other. You know, it'll be in a couple weeks here, finish the regular season up. So that game will be in Cameron Indoor, and I really hope it's not as ugly as this one. Just another example of how ugly and like absurd this game was. Alyssa Utsby had a triple-double technically, but did so with turnovers, which is not the kind of triple-double you want. She had 10 and 12 in points and rebounds and then 11 turnovers. So yeah, Carolina has some things to clean up, but they gutted out a win. Duke has some things to clean up. Both of them got wins on Sunday as well. Carolina over Boston College and Duke beating Virginia. But yeah, offense needs to step up for the two teams here on the Tobacco Road.
That was a really great end of game sequence too from Kara Lawson's squad in that win over UVA in Charlottesville. That's just a sidebar for me. My question for you, Mitch. Carolina is currently the top team defensively in the ACC. They only allow 54.4 points per game. Duke is 5th. They only allow 61.1 points per game. So do you write this off as these were 2 of the better defenses in the ACC, let alone the country? Or is it, my goodness, Duke shot 23%, like their offense has serious question marks?
I think for Carolina, you do. Like, you know, like Courtney said after the game, like it was just, I think her and Kara both said, you know, this game set college basketball back, you know, a couple years. Just not a great game to watch if you're a fan. Just really, really ugly basketball. Lots of missed layups, lots of just not really good things. But yeah, 2 great defenses. I think the thing for Duke that is a little bit concerning is like their defense or their offense, excuse me, against Virginia was not that much better. They bounced back and they got that W, but they only won by 5 points. They only shot 36%
It was a
from the
tie game
field.
late too, by the way. It
Yeah,
was very tight late. I watched the fourth quarter.
and only 25% from 3-point land, which it's interesting because before the Carolina Duke game, Carol Lawson was kind of talking about, my offense has been there, but my defense really hasn't. And these past 2 games, it's been flipped and it's been the opposite. So Duke has to figure out how to kind of get back to what was working on them for offense earlier this year. It seems to me like, Toby Fournier as a freshman, a lot of freshmen kind of hit this stretch where it's like, oh, the season is a much, much longer than when I dealt with in high school, or it's a lot tougher, or, whatever. I think she's going through that a little bit right now. And Reagan Richardson has cooled off, from her early season performances. So I think Duke will be fine, but certainly you want to see them shoot a whole lot better in their next game, which is not an easy one that we'll get to later.
The crazy part about this game was that it was up against a game in the SEC in which the final score, LSU 89, Tennessee 87, truly created a contrast unlike any other. And it's the reason so many people were tweeting, how is this the same sport? Because both were airing on, I believe both were on ESPN, or one was on the SEC network. Either way, both being aired by the Mouse at the same exact time. And you couldn't believe it was happening. But that brings us to number 2 in this week's starting 5. We questioned Kim Mulkey and LSU's operations staff having a dress like Kim Mulkey day and contest at their win over Auburn last week in Baton Rouge. Maybe we lit a fire under them, Mitch, because we also questioned their 18-0 record, one of 5 undefeateds remaining, right? We're still at 5. We're at 5 undefeateds because UCLA did not play this weekend, so they remain undefeated. And we questioned because that strength of schedule in the non-conference for Kim Mulkey is always perhaps a bit lukewarm comparatively to some of their peers, especially in the SEC. But they get a big dub over a Tennessee team that you and I have both been extremely high on over the last few weeks in particular. Anissa Morrow has just truly become the transfer. Not that she wasn't in year 1 in Baton Rouge, but she has become the player that we saw at DePaul early on in her career before she transferred to LSU. In this game, 23 points, 21 rebounds, Mitch, 8 of them on the offensive end of the floor. She had 2 assists as well. Yes, you also get 20 points from Flowers J. Johnson. Yes, this is the Kaylin Gilbert game because she had the game winner. She also dropped 22. But I think this LSU team is maybe silenced critics like us and has assured us that, yes, they don't have Angel Reese anymore. Haley Van Lith has gone on to greener pastures at TCU. But this is still a national title contender under Kim Mulkey.
Yeah, I mean, it was a gutty win for sure. And yeah, I think Anissa Morrow is playing her way into the conversation for one of the best players in the country and maybe a spot on, the first team for All-Americans. I think that, while Anissa was certainly great last season as well, alongside Angel Reese, what you're seeing this year is kind of, her taking more ownership of the paint and being able to have more movement in the front court. Now that Angel is no longer there and, eating up rebounds and getting those second chances, now those are going to Anissa. She had 8 offensive boards in this game, that added to her 21 overall. You mentioned her 23 points. She was awesome. I think she's one of the things that makes them go. Flau'jae Johnson, I think, is clearly the bus driver. If we want to, bust that term back out. They got a game, coming up here. I think they're probably going to be undefeated still heading into it on January 23rd. They're going to go to South Carolina. That's an 8:00 tip on ESPN. That is going to be must-watch box office, no different than the past South Carolina LSU meetings. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And I didn't realize this, but they're going to play Tennessee twice this year. So they're going to get they're going to get a return game with Kim Caldwell's Lady Vols, as long as, she's not out on maternity leave.
Baby bump, folks.
Yeah, the Lady Vols might have to play without her, but we'll see. I did see that Kim Mulkey got Kim Caldwell like a baby present, which was cool. Handed her a little gift bag before the game.
It's all about Kim Mulkey because it always has to be about Kim, not
of course
not Kim Caldwell. It's about the other Kim, even if the other Kim is pregnant.
Yeah, you know,
She has
it
to be the
is.
main. It's main character energy, and like I'm fine with it because every sport needs someone like her. I mean, she is, and this may be hyperbole, so tell me if I'm wrong. If only in his later years, she is the Rick Pitino of women's college basketball.
Oh, certainly. Yes. Yeah,
Multiple
absolutely.
national championships across multiple schools. Keep still hanging around, still doing things the old school way. Like I don't want to compare her to Dabo because that's a whole nother can of worms. But it's the Rick Pitino vibe of like I am this grandfather of emeritus role, and I need to, work, be young and hip, but I also need to be bringing the younger generation along. And also look at me, look at how great I am.
Yes. Yeah. Two people, not afraid to tell you what's on their mind. Two people not afraid to be the main character, like you said. Two people not afraid to be the villain. Two people who are happy to remind you of what basketball was like in the 1980s. Two people who have an affinity for dressing pretty weirdly, if we could say that. Rick Pitino likes to break out those all white suits every now and then, and likes to attract the TV Kramers that way. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Kim Mulkey and Rick Pitino, hand in hand. I think they're that's a pretty apt comparison.
Of note, Tennessee and LSU still the number 1 and number 2 scoring offenses in the SEC. So I am looking forward to that rematch. And I do think the baby bump could be in effect for our friends on Rocky Top. Let's keep it moving with this week's starting five, Mitch. This is one that, again, I alluded to our her of the week. I was thinking about giving it to a team. You then pointed out Grace Larkins to me. So I said, okay, no question. She's our her of the week. But also because we wanted to reserve this team and this game in the starting five, because producer Dimitri pointed out it's the ultimate chicken or the egg question. Did Pitt have one of the greatest comebacks of all time, or did SMU have one of the worst second halves we've ever seen in recent memory?
I think the answer is both. And yeah, just to lay this out for our listeners, SMU going up against Pitt. Frankly, when we do our preseason polls, amongst the media covering the ACC, we have to pick the order of finish. And I got to tell you, SMU and Pitt, pretty much bottom of the barrel in the ACC. I think a lot of people expected both of those teams to finish near the bottom. Torrey Verity going under a rebuild there at Pitt. SMU, not really great in the American when they were, in that league, and now coming into the ACC, I just think a lot of people expected them not to be so great. And here we see SMU goes up by 32 points at one point in the first half. And then Pitt comes out at halftime and they outscored SMU 28-0 in the third quarter, 28-0. I mean, the box score is one of the weirdest things that you can ever see. And Pitt goes on to win 72-59. It ties the largest comeback in NCAA women's hoops history. It just, frankly, just a wild result. It tied, I'm looking it up now, February 18th, 2006, Texas State trailed UTSA 40-8 late in the first half before going on to win by 2 in OT. I don't know how you do that. I think, but yeah, it's a combination of both. I feel like, an abysmal performance by SMU in the second half, and also just a great comeback from Pitt.
So what's most impressive? So that's the chicken or the egg. You think it's a little bit of both. What was most impressive? Holding them to 10 points in the entire second half, a scoreless third quarter. Which feat for you defensively for Pitt is more like, I can't believe this actually happened?
Oh, I think it's the third quarter. Just like you just don't see that often in women's college basketball in general, basketball in general, like a scoreless quarter. I just think about like so many possessions. Like you didn't score a layup, you didn't get to the
Didn't get
free
to the
throw
free throw
line
line.
and knock down just one. 28-0 is wild for a quarter of basketball. I'm looking at, this is from the Associated Press or ESPN News Services. It's, SMU shot 2 of 28 in the second half. That's a 7% clip. Pitt started the game 0 of 10 and then 2 of 20 from the field. So that's not great. But in the second half, Pitt made 16 of its final 24 shots. I mean, really a tale of two halves. Like, as cliche as it is, like that's very much what we had here. But shout out to Pitt. That is a great win for Torrey Verdi as he tries to rebuild this thing, and now they're going to be rewarded with a trip to NC State on Thursday. That is not going to be easy to repeat that performance, but good for Pitt. Really, really not good for SMU.
You thought that Duke, North Carolina set the sport back years, decades, centuries. Oh, baby, did the ACC have more for us on Sunday? Let's keep it moving for our next game in this week's starting five. We head back to the Southeastern Conference. A little bit of a news dump that occurred after we had recorded last week's episode of the podcast. Ashlyn Watkins done for the year with a torn ACL. We were commenting, Mitch, last week on the podcast about I don't want to say cryptic tweet that the University of South Carolina's women's basketball account set out on X, but how it was just very strange. They said that although Ashlyn won't be returning to the game, we know she's cheering on from the locker room, which was a very weird way of giving her status update after suffering that knee injury. Ultimately, we found out a few days after our last week's podcast dropped that she is done for the year. And that, of course, is on the heels of all of the off the court controversy that began the 2024-2025 calendar or school calendar year for the forward for South Carolina. But without Ashlyn Watkins, they still looked like South Carolina, Mitch. Final score, Gamecock 67, Texas 50. This game was tight up until probably midway through the second quarter. I looked at my boyfriend, Kevin, and I said, man, I don't think Chloe Kitts is going to cut it. I don't know what they're going to do without Watkins. I am seriously concerned about their depth at the post.
Yeah.
And then what did they do? They did what Dawn Staley teams do. They just started shooting the crud out of the ball, and they put Madison Booker in a bind. They got her slightly into foul trouble, if I may. Rory Harmon, I thought, had a decent day outside of, the second half. Like, she had a good start, I guess would be the way to describe it, because she finished 4 of 11. She made her first 2 or 3 baskets. And so you're like, okay, this is going to be a good game. And then South Carolina did what South Carolina does. Madison Booker finished this game 3 of 19 from the field. She did only have 1 foul, but Vic did pull her pretty early, which was a bit surprising. I guess he was concerned about potential foul trouble. And so they really laid down the law when it came to the Longhorn Stars from that mid-second quarter on, and the Gamecocks keep rolling 16-1. I understand why they're not the number 1 team in the country, but man, I would be surprised if they don't somehow, some way get back to that top spot at some point this year.
Yeah, I mean, what impressed me about South Carolina was really the defense. I mean, you hold Texas to 28% shooting, 20% from three-point land. You mentioned how they, Madison Booker struggled, 3 of 19 from the floor. Rory Harmon, 4 of 11. When you can hold what are, I think, Texas's best 2 players to essentially a combined 7 of 30, you're probably going to win that game. And South Carolina pulls away with a 17-point win there. But also, on the offensive end, like, they shot 51% from the floor, the Gamecocks did. Outscored Texas 16-3 on fast breaks. I, like you, am still worried about, that front court depth. I think they're just going to try and basically get by with sort of a rotation that involves Chloe Kitts, Sanaya Fegan, and Joyce Edwards. And then just try to kind of let the guards do their thing. Sanaya Fegan, big on the boards in this one, 9 rebounds. Also at 6 blocks, which, I think really helps South Carolina out in terms of the defense. I think, the depth that they have at guard, and if, you can get by with Kitts and Fegan and Edwards inside, I'm curious to see kind of how that experiment goes. We did see South Carolina lose early this year to a really good center. I'm curious to see kind of what happens when they face another really good center or another really, really good post player. They're going to be tested here in a couple weeks. And they got a really tough 4-game stretch coming up. They're going at Alabama on Thursday night, home against Oklahoma on Sunday, and then home for LSU, and then at Tennessee. So if the Gamecocks slip up in one of those games there, I wouldn't be surprised it's at the expense of an opposing post player having a really good game.
I'm glad you brought up the fast break points, because that was really the catalyst for that second half of the second quarter run that South Carolina went on. They were only 3 of 7 from 3-point land. So I don't want everyone who missed this game to have this perception of, oh my goodness, they just started chucking up threes. No, they allowed their defense to turn into offense, but that's when you were able to, if you're Dawn Staley, that's where you were able to showcase the speed and agility of your guards. And I do think the mid-range floater, the just sheer ability, backdoor cuts, to have a motion offense that South Carolina team can run, in which they find ways to get those guards open, not just beyond the arc. It's impressive, and it speaks to coaching. And quite honestly, to your point, if they do make a run in this thing come March, this may go down as Dawn. I know Dawn said last year was her best coaching job. This would be the best coaching job of all time for all the reasons we've outlined, between not really having a true bus driver to not really having that alpha designated back to the basket center that traditionally South Carolina has had. And quite frankly, the marquee names, like, yes, don't get me wrong, Joyce Edwards, everyone's going to know her name by season's end. She is only a freshman. Malaysia Fulwiley is my favorite player on this team. And yes, she played 21 minutes, but she comes off the bench, for crying out loud. She did drop 8 in this win. Raven Johnson, again, Chloe Kitts, Bree Hall, these are names that we've come to know. But it's not like they have Asia Wilson, Aaliyah Boston, Camila Cardoso anymore. And if this sum of the parts is better than the parts of the sum, then I'm excited to see what Dawn does with this roster.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think if this South Carolina team makes it to the Final Four, I think certainly, yeah, I would consider this to be Dawn's best coaching job. Just when you talk about, not having like that real true number one star, and then losing probably your best post player in Ashlyn Watkins, who we saw has the ability to change the game with her defense and her offense too. We did see her dunk earlier this year. So, yeah, I mean, I think South Carolina, like, they're going to figure it out. I believe in Dawn. I would expect them to win the SEC again. I think it would be kind of shocking if they don't. That said, there are a lot of really good teams in this league. So we'll see kind of how they handle, the LSUs and the Oklahomas and the Tennessees of the world as this kind of goes along. But, yeah, certainly. Little worried about the depth, but yeah, like you said, this team can make shots and they're really fast and athletic. So if you get into kind of a track meet with them and you're turning the ball over a bunch, Malaysia Fulwiley is going to load it up as she kind of barrels towards the rim play after play.
They could make a run, but something tells me as we wrap up this week's starting 5, I don't think anyone from South Carolina is on the Wooden Award watch list. And something tells me, Mitch, that's the first time we've been able to say that in, a decade?
Yeah, actually, Te-Hina Paopao is on the watch list.
Okay.
It's 25 players, so a lot of room there. But yeah, this came out. I think this came out last week, maybe a day after we recorded, or the second day after we recorded. And anyway, yeah. So we got the Wooden Award watch list out, which is the Player of the Year, women's college basketball. I just wanted to kind of talk through some headliners here. So, I'm looking at the list, and it's all the usual suspects: Juju Watkins, Paige Beckers, Hannah Hidalgo, Lauren Betts. UConn, we got Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong. USC, Kiki Riaffin's also on there. Olivia Miles is also on there for Notre Dame. LSU, we talked about earlier, Anissa Morrow and Flajay Johnson. TCU has 2 players, Sidonia Prince and Haley Van Lith. And then, Te-Hina Paopao, some other notable names on this list: Georgia Amore, Kentucky, Madison Booker, Reagan Beers, Tanaya Latson. Strong is the only freshman here, which I think is noteworthy. Lucy Olson is here. Oyoka Lee, JJ Quinterly, West Virginia. Some mid-major love, Harmony Turner at Harvard. So anyway, I'm just looking through this list, and my brain goes, oh, wonder what the odds are. So I went to DraftKings and pulled them up. And the betting favorite right now, as we record this on January 13th, is Juju Watkins at plus 110. Then you got Hannah Hidalgo at plus 130 and Paige Beckers at plus 330. Those are the 3 players with the best odds. I think it probably is a 3-player race, between those 3, which is interesting because Hannah Hidalgo and Paige Beckers both going through some injury issues right now. It sounds to me like Hannah's injury is not really all that serious. It sounds like she tweaked an ankle in practice and Notre Dame wasn't exactly playing the best of the best in the ACC last week, so they gave her some rest, it sounds like. Paige, all signs point to her being back soon. I think Juju is probably the betting favorite right now because she's the only one out of those three who's completely healthy. I think out of those three, to me, so far, I think Hannah Hidalgo has been the best player in the country. Now,
I agree. By the way, I mean, I think it's Hannah. The argument for Juju is that each of those three players, you just ran through the watch list of the 25 players, each of those players has one teammate who is also in the quote unquote top 25 to watch for. Of those three pairs, who has to carry the weight more? And as good as Kiki Ariafen has been since transferring to USC, I watched that game last night. I watched their game in Piscataway against Rutgers. There is no question who the star is. Whereas Sarah Strong has picked up the pace, not just in Paige Becker's absence, but I would argue they were complementing each other, maybe not to the extent of Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo, but to the point that you wouldn't realize one's a fifth-year senior and one's a freshman. Then when it comes to the Notre Dame duo, I think that Hannah Hidalgo, in terms of sheer scoring output, defensive presence on the floor, being a walking bucket of the three, yes, I think she has had statistically the most impressive. And if you want to talk eye test, I think eye test wise, she has been the most dominant player of the three. But I think it comes down to, and it's so dumb, but it's the same thing as the NFL MVP award, Mitch. Who means more to their team? Who is the one carrying their team into the postseason? And when all is said and done, the answer is going to be Juju Watkins.
I think so. I think if you frame it that way, like, yeah, who means more to their team? Like, you look at kind of the biggest wins that USC has had this year, over UConn, over Maryland. Juju's been the best player in those games. Juju's basically been the reason that USC has won those games. So, yeah, I think if you frame it that way, certainly Juju. Hannah has the numbers. She has the two-way thing going for her, as she's one of the nation's leader in steals and scoring. But yeah, like you said, that's really a true partnership there between her and Olivia Miles. And, Miles just carried them in some games. And the same thing that we're seeing kind of between Strong and Paige Beckers as well for UConn. For our listeners, I wanted to, there's three players after Juju, Hannah, and Paige Beckers
I like
on
this.
the betting here.
Some dark horse candidates. Let's hear it, Mitch.
So, I mean, the odds they just jump way by a wide margin after Paige Becker. So at plus 5,000, you have Anissa Morrow, Lauren Betts, and Olivia Miles at those three. I kind of like, if you want to play around a little bit and pick kind of a long shot pick there, I like both Anissa Morrow and Lauren Betts. I love Olivia Miles too. I just don't think there's like a universe right now where she gets the National Player of the Year award over her teammate Hannah Hidalgo. But Anissa Morrow, as we talked about before, is putting up really great numbers this year for LSU, and averaging a double-double, leads the nation in rebounding. Putting up basically the numbers that Angel Reese was putting up, if not a little bit better and a little bit more efficiently as well. And if LSU, if they're, I don't think they're going to be undefeated at regular season's end, but if they're close to it, if something happens to South Carolina and LSU wins the SEC regular season title or something, there's a universe where, you look at Anissa Morrow's numbers and maybe she's the player of the year. Lauren Betts is another one who, if she keeps doing what she's doing with UCLA, and UCLA finished the season undefeated or close to it and wins the regular season Big Ten title in their first year, you look at her and she's the best player on the best team. And sometimes that's who this award goes to. So I think, if you're looking for, a long shot, good odds bet, I would look at Lauren Betts and Anissa Morrow.
Hannah Hidalgo, Lamar Jackson, Olivia Miles, Derrick Henry, Spider-Man meme. You got that one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with that said, I do think Lamar Jackson's going to win the MVP award of the NFL. So maybe Hannah Hidalgo can also win the Wooden Award. Let's look ahead to this upcoming week, Mitch, on the hardwood. Chef's Table, kick us off with this week's appetizer. What should our listeners be watching for?
Lots of good games this week. I think on Thursday we have
The
10
Calgorithm.
on Thursday we have 10 games featuring ranked teams, and then on Sunday we have 18 games featuring ranked teams. So lots of really good basketball on Thursday through Sunday. Yeah, to start us off here, I think this is the game I'm going to go to this week. This is Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Number 18 Cal at number 16 Duke on the ACC network. Cal coming off of 2 wins. They beat NC State, and they beat someone else who is escaping me at the moment. But nonetheless, Cal playing really good basketball so far this year. Really like what they're doing under Sharman Smith, playing really well in the ACC this season. And then you look at Duke, rebounded with a win over Virginia after losing to North Carolina. It's just an interesting matchup. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing Cal in person. The other team Cal beat was Florida State, so they got 2 home wins out there in California. I don't know that the last time Cal came to North Carolina's Triangle in like a non-conference kind of matchup. So I'm sure it's been quite a while, and they're going to get to play in Cameron, and it should be a fun atmosphere. 2 ranked ACC teams on Thursday night.
Anytime you can hold Tanaya Latson, another walking bucket, to 13 points, 3 of 11 shooting. Folks, she's been dropping 30 plus performances, 30 plus burgers. I was going to say a 40 burger, which was the single game record at Florida State. And Cal held her to 3 of 11. And granted, yes, that required a cross-country road trip for the girls from Tallahassee. But still, that is extremely impressive. And knowing what we've already outlined about Duke's defense, man, oh man, wouldn't that be something if this even, like, it's going to be a battle of 2 strong defenses. I don't want to wish upon you a second straight rock fight at Cameron Indoor, but we may be having that in the Triangle.
I don't think Cal's offense is capable of being that bad. I hope I just didn't jinx it, but we'll see. They like to shoot it, and they shoot it pretty well. So hopefully that's the situation on Thursday night.
I got to tell you, Mitch, and for our casual women's basketball fans who listen to this podcast to just catch up on what they may have missed so that they can go to the water cooler and have a little fun nugget to, share with their friends. If I told you in August that both the Cal football team, the Cal women's basketball team, the Georgia Tech football team, and the Georgia Tech women's basketball team would be among the best in their respective conferences by season's end, you would have said to me,
crazy talk.
And here we are. It's a reality. And Georgia Tech is the main entree this week on the Women's Basketball Podcast.
Are they?
Yes, Georgia, or rather, no, I missed it. No, I jumped ahead too much. Sorry, we're gonna go Utes. Georgia Tech is gonna be in Making Money with Mitch. I got so excited.
Oh yeah, we do. We'll talk Georgia Tech.
I jumped ahead because I got so excited because Cal and Georgia Tech, who we have defended on this program now for months now, saying justice for Georgia Tech, put them in the top 25. Now we got them in the top 15. But no, we'll go to another team that deserves some love for the main entree. We already mentioned Haley Van Lith, but how about the Utes still hanging around the top 25 despite losing Lynn Roberts in the early onset of this season?
Yeah, kind of a weird season for Utah so far. They lose to Northwestern early. I kind of, after that one, I was like, okay, well, they're not really worth paying attention to. Then their coach leaves for the WNBA. And then they rattle off some wins, including a win over Notre Dame, which is funny. This matchup here, TCU-Utah, these are the 2 teams in the country who have wins over Notre Dame, which is pretty impressive. So, yeah, this is Friday night. Oh, no. Yes, Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, number 23 Utah at number 10 TCU on ESPN+. So fire up the streamer for this one. Haley Van Lith and Sidonia Prince playing pretty well lately. This is another test for them. Pretty good Utah team that looks like it's going to at least make the tournament and maybe make some more noise in the Big 12.
I do want to note those victories over Notre Dame came in the Cayman Islands.
They did.
That is going to be, if Notre Dame was to somehow run the table, I don't think they do, but if they do somehow run the table, Mitch, that is going to be the most fun stat heading into March, that the Fighting Irish are undefeated in the continental United States, even if they have 2 losses on the schedule.
Yeah. And I believe, I mean, Maddie Westfeld was out for both of those games, and I think Lisa Carlin might have missed one as well. So definitely, like, you can put a couple asterisks next to those games. And I certainly have, as you know, as I'm voting in the AP Top 25 poll, I think I was one of two people to vote Notre Dame #1 this week. I just think, you know, having seen them in person, I just think they're the best team when they're fully healthy. And now since you said something about them potentially losing, now I'm looking at their schedule to see what is the best opportunity for an
I just think
ACC
that they're
team
they're
to
gonna
beat
they're gonna
them.
slip up once or twice just by virtue. And look, I think that for a lot of reasons we've already outlined, the
Hmm.
ACC, I don't want to call it top heavy, because if the top includes Cal, I mean, it makes you want to adjust what reality is typically. But I do think that it's a quote unquote weaker ACC, although maybe not as weak as the men's side right now.
Honestly, right now I'm looking at it, and so they have a stretch. Just kind of playing the schedule game with us here for a second, listeners. In late February, beginning on February 16th, they play Duke at home. Then they have to go to Miami, and then they have to go to NC State, and then they have Florida State at home. So those are probably, you know, three out of your four games, three ranked opponents. And you have back-to-back road games, the second of which is at NC State, which is going to be a sold-out Reynolds Coliseum. Maybe it's that one. Maybe we get a, you know, little year of the wolf, you know, making a comeback here in 2025, little extension. Maybe NC State is the team that hands Notre Dame its only ACC loss.
And TCU has only lost once, folks, and that was to then number 3 South Carolina. That means, Mitch, they are currently on an 8-game winning streak heading into a game Tuesday night against UCF and then the Utes on Friday. What is this week's dessert on the schedule, on the menu?
Speaking of the Gamecocks, yeah, this is Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Gets the ESPN mothership treatment. Number 13 Oklahoma at number 2 South Carolina. This is another game where, you know, the Gamecocks are not going to have Ashlyn Watkins, and they're going to be facing a very talented post player in Reagan Beers, who is on that Wooden Award watch list, who's having a really good season for the Oklahoma Sooners, and someone who might be a little extra motivated to play well against South Carolina, considering South Carolina eliminated her Oregon State Beavers from the NCAA tournament in the Elite Eight last year. So we'll see. But I think that's going to be a fun game, a really interesting game. I had a couple stats here. So Oklahoma beat Texas A&M in their most recent win. They held them to 26.9% shooting, the lowest field goal percentage by a conference opponent during the Jenny Baranczyk era. So for the Sooners, you know, defense coming along, and you got Reagan Beers leading your offense. You know, things are going right there in Norman, I think.
Reagan Beers averages 17.2 points per game. Texas held her to just 11 points. They've lost 2 of their last 4, but did get that big win at Tennessee. I'm very excited to see what version, although it's been a pretty consistent version of Jenny Baranczyk Sooners, but I'm very intrigued by the possibility, especially knowing that they do have to go to Columbia, South Carolina. It is time to make money with Mitch. Not only do we give you our best games to watch for, we give you the games that you can gamble on, folks, here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. I know that it's hard. I lamented on it a few weeks ago to find women's basketball lines at your favorite local sports book. That's why Mitch Northam is here with all you need to know about how you can make some money this week. And that does include the Yellow Jackets. I know Georgia Tech. Here we go. Georgia Tech talk.
Yeah, unfortunately, last week I went 1-2, so I'm now 10-8 for the season. But we still got a winning record. But Tennessee and West Virginia let me down. NC State did not. NC State not only covering at Stanford but winning. Shout out to Sanaya Rivers, who had a double in that game. Yeah, this week to start us off here, Michigan State is at Rutgers on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. This is on Big Ten Plus. The line I'm looking at is 14.5 for Michigan State. I just think that's too many points. I think Michigan State is a perfectly fine team, you know, going to be an NCAA tournament team, but they're playing Rutgers in Piscataway, New Jersey. Kaiomi McMiller is back and scoring points.
The product is back, folks.
Excuse me, the product.
Yes, product.
She's back. I think she just had a 30-point game. I just think that's too many points, and I think Rutgers will make it somewhat close, and we'll have a good game from Kaiomi McMiller on Wednesday night.
Of note, the Spartans have also lost 3 of their last 5, and 2 of those losses came on the road. I don't think they've actually won on the road yet in Big Ten play, Mitch. So I really do like that play.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So hopefully that one works out. Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern, the Yellow Jackets at Notre Dame.
Sorry, Yellow Jackets. I tried to hype you up for the last 8 minutes for Mitch to just tear you down in one bet.
I think in the long term that Georgia Tech is going to be fine as long as they get Danny Carnegie back. She's battling an injury of some sort right now. She went out in the Virginia Tech loss and then missed Georgia Tech's loss on Sunday to Louisville. So, if she's not back, which I'm not sure that she will be going into this game at Notre Dame, I see Notre Dame favored by 11.5. That seems to be kind of a pretty comfortable margin, I think, for a Notre Dame team that's really clicking. I think Hannah Hildaga will probably be back for that game. It's at home. It's in South Bend. I still really like Georgia Tech. I just think the Notre Dame is on kind of a different level. So Georgia Tech not at full strength. I think that Notre Dame can win this game by 12.
I have a very important update for you, Mitch.
Okay.
Our friends at Sports Illustrated, before you place this bet, and you may change the line the pick that you currently have on our rundown, our friends at Sports Illustrated have found out the due date for Tennessee head coach Kim Caldwell.
Oh.
It is 1 week from when we are recording right now, Monday, January 20th. And as I look at the rundown and the final Making Money with Mitch pick, you have the Volunteers covering a 6.5 point spread against rival Vanderbilt Sunday afternoon. I think the bigger odds, will Kim Caldwell be on the sidelines?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm sticking with the pick.
I agree with the pick because the baby bump, one way or another, the baby bump, it's going to be real.
Yeah, I think, if she's on the sidelines coaching, great. If she's not, maybe, some extra motivation for the Lady Vols to get a win in Kim Caldwell's absence. But yeah, this is Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern, SEC Network Plus, Tennessee at Vanderbilt, in-state matchup there in the SEC. I like Tennessee to go into Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt's a pretty solid team, probably a tournament team. Maybe it is an 8 or 9 seed, somewhere in that ballpark. But I think Tennessee can go in and win by, 3 possessions.
Yeah, as we noted last week, our her of the week, the freshman sensation for Vanderbilt, Michaela Blakes, who dropped a Vanderbilt program record, an SEC program record, 35 plus points in her SEC debut. And so, look, the Commodores can light it up, but as we know, Tennessee is the highest scoring offense in the Southeastern Conference. So to recap, Mitch has Rutgers plus 14.5 Wednesday night over Michigan State, just to cover, folks, not to outright win. Notre Dame, an 11.5 point favorite against Georgia Tech, and Tennessee, a 6.5 point favorite at Vanderbilt. That is Making Money with Mitch. It is time for our last call. And Mitch, we haven't really gotten to the W and women's professional basketball a whole heck of a lot in this week's episode. So you pick your, we'll do a little goosebumps, choose your own adventure. Would you like to begin with some of the early pre-free agency moves in the W, or the fact that we get Unrivaled, the debut this upcoming weekend on TNT?
Yeah, let's talk about Unrivaled.
On Unrivaled on TNT, as I alluded to, that'll be the first 2 games, 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock Friday night. We have, I'm still getting used to the logos of the teams. I don't know by seeing them, so I have to actually don't judge me, folks. I have to pull it up. Actually, I have to pull it up so I can actually see what the team names are. Here we go. We get the Mist versus the Lunar Owls. I apologize, folks. TNT Max 7 o'clock on Friday, and then the Rose versus the Vinyl at 8 o'clock. And I believe Kate Martin is on the Rose, if memory serves me. Again, we're still learning these teams, but nonetheless, I am so excited just to have professional basketball, so many faces, so many names that we've all grown to know and love through watching and covering the W. And it's back. And I love the fact that they do have such a massive TV deal on a cable network that is readily available. And also HBO Max is one of the biggest streaming services in the country.
Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule. It looks like all these games are going to be streamed on Max and also over the air with TNT and True TV. It looks like. Now I'm just kind of reminding myself
Who's on which team? Which
who's on
team is
which
which?
team.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
Okay,
got
so Lunar Owls, since they're playing, and the Mist. Jewel Lloyd, which we'll get to her here in a second, is on the
mm,
Mist with her former teammate Brianna Stewart, who is the captain and of course the co-founder of Unrivaled. Aaliyah Edwards, Rakea Jackson, Dejanay Carrington, Courtney Vandersloot, and then on the Lunar Owls, Skylar Diggins Smith, Courtney Williams, Alicia Gray. Cam Brink will not be playing in this game. And then Nafisa Collier, the fellow co-founder. Nice that they're going to get to play each other in the opening weekend. And then Shakira Austin in that first game. And then we said Rose. Lexi Hull's on the Rose. That's who it is. But Lexi Hull is with Angel Reese. I wonder if CaitlinClark's going to show up at the game or not. Chelsea Gray is the captain. And then for the vinyl, Arike Ogumbawale is the captain. And she is joined by Jordan Canada, Ryan Howard, coached by Teresa Witherspoon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if we'll actually see Cam Brink on the court in this league. Before her injury, she was supposed to be on the Team USA 3-on-3 team. So all signs point to her being a really great 3-on-3 player. And this team, the Lunar Owls, you got Nafisa Collier, Courtney Williams, Skylar Diggins Smith. It's a pretty good lineup there. I'm looking forward to just kind of seeing what the vibes are with this league. I'll be tuned in on Max for sure.
So apparently Cameron Brink, much like our friend Asia Wilson, is hanging out in Miami, although I don't think they're hanging out for the same reasons. She is expected to practice with Unrivaled. It's just a matter of when she actually will be cleared for game action.
Sure.
Unrivaled kicks off this weekend, but WNBA free agency kicks off on the 21st. Players can be cored, which for those of you who are more familiar with NFL free agency terms, that's essentially, Mitch, I think it's fair to say it's the equivalent of being tagged in the National Football League, a franchise tag in which a team that you are currently or previously employed by says, we are keeping you on a 1-year deal for your services, even if that means playing for a certain price that is not what you negotiated for, but we have the rights to core you or to tag you. And so you will be under club control for the next year. And so we already know of a couple players who were cored on this Monday as we record. And I think that the most curious one for me, Mitch, is the idea of Kelsey Plum being cored by the Las Vegas Aces. But there's plenty of buzz that she's being cored, just like you hear about players in the NFL being franchise tagged. They're tagged and traded, and then they sign a new deal with their new club. There's a lot of smoke about her going to the Valkyries, a lot of familiar former aces in the Golden State franchise that maybe Kelsey Plum might want to go there and become the face of that brand new franchise. And in turn, because Jewel Lloyd has requested a trade from the Seattle Storm, would the Aces turn around and go get Jewel Lloyd to replace Kelsey Plum? I think the smoke surrounding that is rather fascinating, especially knowing that Jewel Lloyd will be playing on Unrivaled and Kelsey Plum has withdrawn.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the two players who got cored today, Kelsey Plum being one of them and Satou Sabally being the other.
We'll get to her in a second. Don't you worry. Satou gets her own line in the rundown.
Okay, we'll save the Satou talk then. Kelsey Plum, I can kind of see it going both ways. I can see the Aces hanging on to her, and just kind of playing out the string with the core this year, or like you said, trading her for assets, which the Aces do not have a lot of because they've either traded them over the years or they've gotten penalized and gotten draft picks taken away for various transgressions. I kind of wonder what happens there. And maybe, after this playoff exit this past season, I wonder if they maybe are rethinking, kind of reevaluating the roster and maybe kind of rebuilding it in a different way around Asia Wilson and Jackie Young. getting another year out of Chelsea Gray. So yeah, Kelsey Plum's future is certainly interesting, and I think something to keep an eye on. And then yeah, if they do get rid of her, are they the landing spot for Jewel Lloyd, or one of these other guards that's going to be a free agent? Diamond DeShields is a free agent. Brittany Griner is a free agent. I didn't realize that.
Apparently, I mean, she's been a free agent apparently the last few years,
Yeah.
independent of the situation in Russia, and she just keeps re-signing with the Mercury. But I think the Mercury are even in an even more interesting spot because they obviously don't know what Diana Taurasi is going to do. There certainly
Right.
was a lot of buzz about if this is the last time it was real or whatever that final line and final sign off, what we believe could be the final sign off from Taurasi was. And if you're the Mercury, are you keeping Brittany Griner around because you're clinging to this semblance of the past? Or do you say we're tearing it all down and starting from scratch and we want to start at ground zero with young players? It's even more different than what I was going to say about the Aces, which is because they've traditionally paid their young stars well ahead of the offseason and free agency approaching. And the fact that they haven't extended an offer to Kelsey Plum, the fact that they haven't tried to renegotiate, re-extend contracts with Asia Wilson and with Jackie Young, does that say that that's another franchise that says maybe we need to retool and rethink where we're going in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. Kelsey Mitchell, also a free agent. And then just kind of two vets that I'm keeping an eye on. I wonder, does Elena Delle Donne come back to the WNBA this season? Or is she good? I also kind of wonder about what Tina Charles is going to do. I think she's closing in on a couple records still. I mean,
Got one last year. Yeah.
showed last year with the Atlanta Dream that she's perfectly capable of still playing at a high level and still being a starter. Does she go and join sort of like a dream team last year, a younger team where she can kind of be the veteran presence, or does she go chase a ring and kind of come off the bench for somebody instead? I kind of wonder what happens there. It'll be an interesting free agent cycle for sure.
Well, speaking of ring chasing, I said Satou Sabally needed her own segment in this week's episode because I don't know if outside of Tyreek Hill, we've had a player say, yep, I told them I'm not coming back. I mean, maybe Yannick Ngakoue here in Jacksonville, where he was like fighting with the owner's son on Twitter and they tagged him anyways. Like, I guess that's maybe like the closest I can get to this, because she straight up said, I told the Wings, I don't want to come back. Trade me. I'm done. If you core me, I'm out. I'm not playing. And there's been so much buzz this offseason, Mitch, about a potential landing spot in the state of Indiana and perhaps teaming up in the front court with Aaliyah Boston. And it's almost been like, I think there was like one tweet that she even liked where someone suggested, would you want to go play for Stephanie White and go hang out with Aaliyah and CaitlinClark?
Mm-hmm.
And so
I'm
I
sure
don't want
she
to call
would.
it, I don't want to call it tampering, but like this is such a fascinating storyline that I did not see coming. She is 26 years old. If she had made it to true unrestricted free agency, she was going to be one of the hottest names on the market. I also think that it speaks to the state of the Dallas Wings. Do you pay Arike Ogunbowale? Are you anticipating with the number 1 overall pick in the WNBA draft, getting Paige Beckers, Olivia Miles, whoever it is, and also starting from ground zero?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if I'm the Dallas Wings, like you can't really play hardball, so to speak, with Satou Sabally and like try to make her like force her to come play for you this year. Like it's clear that she doesn't want to be there. It's clear that she wants out. Like you gotta just trade her for the best thing that you can get essentially. One thing that I think is interesting with the Dallas Wings is, you mentioned kind of how the organization has been a bit of a dumpster fire here recently.
Despite having the second leading scorer, I guess third, technically, Fee did usurp Arike at the last month of the season, having the second or third leading scorer in the entire league last year.
Yeah. I was listening to Sabrina Merchant at The Athletic, and she was kind of laying out a theory for, Paige Beckers to not enter the draft this year. Paige Beckers does have a year of eligibility left. And I wonder if she watches from afar and she knows if I enter the draft, I'm going to be the number 1 pick. And I'm going to go to the Dallas Wings. And do I want to go there as they're trying to figure out if they're going to rebuild or not? Am I going to have to play with Enrique? What are they doing with Satou? Or do you wait a year where you have a Toronto team coming in? You know, there's more options if you wait a year. Also, is UConn really going to win a title this year? Do you want to wait a year for Sarah Strong to develop and maybe give you a better shot to win the title next year?
Or
I don't know.
Are you like Sue Bird said about CaitlinClark last year, where when you've played at that high of a level, and especially in Paige's case, where you're only risking injury, that's already, let's be real, your career has been cut short because of injury as
Sure.
is. Do you really want to risk that? And as Sue Bird kept saying about Caitlin, you reach a point where you're like, I've done everything that I could possibly do. Why am I just going to draw this thing out? And look, I know I look back and I say, if I could do an extra year at the college, I would do it.
Yeah.
I did. I went to Iowa City and I continued my college career, but didn't go to class. I just lived in another college town. So I understand the sentiment, and it sounds tantalizing to us on the outside. Emotionally, physically, I would sooner see Paige Beckers try to pull an Eli Manning situation. And I think some of the groundwork has already been laid. The Lynn Roberts connection with the Sparks, who have the number 2 overall pick. I think we're headed more towards that scenario of a last second trade where Paige and her team force the Wings' hand, but the Wings also get a haul in the process.
I think that's possible as well. I just, it's fascinating. I just no longer, I think I believed earlier this season, you know, before the lottery and everything, that, okay, this is Paige's last year and it's a done deal. And I'm no longer 100% sure about that, because I know how much she wants to win a title at UConn. And so if they don't this year, like, you know, I don't want to say that winning a title didn't matter to CaitlinClark, but she truly took Iowa to places that had never been before and done things that nobody has ever done before. Paige, like, if she doesn't win a title at UConn, she's just kind of another great player at UConn. I hate to say it, but like, they got so many of them, right? So it's like, if you don't leave your mark in that way, and just listening to her talk over the years, I think that matters to her. But also, like you made your point, she has been in college for a while now, and at some point you want to challenge yourself in a different way, and you want to go be a pro and not have to worry about going to class anymore. So super interesting as we head into March and April and the WNBA off season and all that.
At some point, you're 25 years old. Do you really want to play with 18-year-olds?
Sure.
I mean, granted, she's still going to be playing for Gino.
But if one of them's Sarah Strong, I mean, you know.
Yeah, that's true. That certainly helps. Let's wrap with this. I want to give Juju and company their flowers for the victory against Maryland this past week. But at the same time, Mitch, I was so excited for Brenda Freese and company. I thought the Terps were going to pull this thing off. Cheyenne Sellers, the way she was getting out in transition, backdoor cuts. I was like, this is the moment we've been waiting for. That, not that I want USC to be exposed, but I want the reality to set in that, well, Kiki's been a great acquisition. It's her, it's Juju, and a lot of question marks depending on the week, depending on the game that you're playing. And I have never seen, and I actually, when it came to men's college basketball, I noted today actually on my radio show, I saw such great end of game situational awareness. I noted Duke in a narrow win over UVA, which was perhaps a little bit surprising on the women's front, but I saw maturity. I saw a plan from Carol Lawson that her team executed. I do not know what happened in the final 2 minutes of that Maryland game. I still think they're a top 10 team, but it was just so disheartening. And I say, in my heart of hearts, they are still a top 10 team, because it was against a USC team that's a top 5 team. But it was just so discouraging, because I really, really was rooting for the underdog in that one.
Yeah, not great decision making from Sailor Poffenbarger, especially in those final 2 minutes. But yeah, Maryland, they shot 2 of 14 from 3-point land in that game, 14%, which is extremely not what you want.
We got a lot of poor offenses on this.
Maybe it was it was the winter weather, I think. Just,
right, exactly.
Had them rattled. I think, like you, I still believe that Maryland's a top 10 team, a team capable of going far in the NCAA tournament. Cheyenne Sellers did her thing and balled out, and they did bounce back and got a good win over Wisconsin, where Bree McDaniel and Cheyenne Sellers both with 21 points in that one. Christina Dolce with 18. I think, I'd be real interested to see, Maryland and USC play again in the Big Ten tournament. It was a good game. It was a little sloppy, but, two really talented teams going at each other. Maryland also really tough stretch coming up here. In the next 13 days, they're going to play against number 24 Minnesota, against number 7 Texas, at number 9 Ohio State, and then home for number 1 UCLA. So we're about to really see what the Terps are made of against some of these top teams in the country.
If I may, since we're also both AP voters on the men's side, the comparison I would make to the team that Brenda Fries has assembled, since Cheyenne Sellers is the only notable returner, is Mark Pope's Kentucky team, where he went out and had to create an entirely new roster through the portal, and he's hit on almost everyone, but it's a ton of 5th and 6th year players, and that's largely what the bulk of that Maryland roster is. And I think because I just watched Kentucky on the men's side Saturday, just an absolutely beautiful execution in the final minute 30 of that game at Mississippi State to close out a dramatic victory. And I wanted the same for Brenda, and I wanted the same for Maryland, and I didn't get it. I was just very disheartened.
Yeah. I think I'd like to see this game played again for sure. I still think the Terps are a top 10 team, but tough finish. I think maybe that is a product of, having a bunch of new players in this kind of situation. And also, I mean, for what it's worth, for Maryland's record, they didn't really play a super tough non-conference schedule. They had the Duke game and a couple others that were okay. But that was probably the first time that those players collectively as that group were in that kind of tight situation. So hopefully they're better next time for Brenda.
You will be at our appetizer this week. Number 18 Cal visiting number 16 Duke. Where else in the world of women's basketball will we be able to find you this week, Mitch?
I believe on Sunday, I'm finally going to pay a trip to Reynolds Coliseum for the first time this season and go see NC State play against Virginia. I saw NC State in person earlier this year down in Charlotte when they lost to South Carolina. Despite that loss to Cal, they played really, really well in that win over Stanford. I'm going to go see NC State and kind of do a check-in on the Wolfpack and see what they're up to.
The UNF and JU women are both on the road this week. I did have the call of both UNF women's home games this past weekend. I got to see Florida Gulf Coast up close and personal, check in with Chelsea Lyles and company. It's so funny because it's all the same assistants that Carl Semesco had. Almost all of them played at Florida Gulf Coast. And at the same time, I told them, I showed them my notes, and I said, this is not your grandmother's Florida Gulf Coast. And yet the streak lives. They have not lost in ASUN play in almost 4 years. They continue to receive votes in the coaches poll and the AP poll, and they're probably going to win the league again. And it's incredible because while the motto is still raining threes, Mitch, they don't rain them at nearly as high of a clip. They really only have 3 true shooters on the floor. And speaking with coaches, not just between those two sides, but I've been asking a lot of coaches I've talked to on the men's and women's side this week about that particular dynamic. And they said, look at UConn, look at South Carolina. That's how all rosters are constructed for both the men and the women, just by virtue of the transfer portal and NIL. But it was great to see the Semesco-less Eagles still doing what they do, still beating both UNF and JU by 40 plus. But hey, it was a good call. And I will have the men's game at UNF Arena on Saturday. And of course, we will keep you posted on the very latest, both of our X accounts, on all the doings, goings in the world of women's basketball and beyond. Maybe we'll have a Jaguars head coach by the next time we record one of these podcasts. Something tells me no.
Death, taxes, Florida Gulf Coast winning the ASUN, the Jaguars searching for a head coach every couple of years.
Also, Mia making Iowa references, but outside of the CaitlinClark reference, I did not reference Iowa's 2 losses this week. We're going to just bypass that.
Tough week for the Hawkeyes.
He's Mitch. I'm Mia. This has been the Women's Basketball Podcast. We will catch you next week.
Deuces.